So, I bought a bunch of books. It's a bunch for me, and I bought them at the beginning of October. And I had been saying that I wanted to film a haul, but I also am on the tail end of some post-Hurricane Ida depression. Immediately after the hurricane happened, it was just like, I hate everything. Just getting through this, and it's only been like within the last like several days that I have officially broken through the worst of that depression. I've already read a bunch of these books. So when I go through them, I will tell you what I thought of the ones that I finished. Whenever I talk about books that I've read, even if I say something completely sucks, if you hear me say something that like name a trope or some sort of situation that you're like, oh no, that's totally my thing, go out and get it, because you never really know. So I'm gonna start with the nonfiction. I've been writing a whole bunch more, but what I've been trying to do is just write the stories and send them out. Just do that because in the writing of them, in the problem solving and the creativity of it, I'm sure I will get better at writing short stories, and specifically I'm writing horror short stories. So in order to keep myself kind of motivated with that, besides being on social media and interacting with other horror writers, I was like, oh, let's get some craft books. Like, it's been a while since I've actually read a writing craft book. And so one of the first things that I purchased and also read was this, The Writer's Workshop of Horror. And this is basically like a lot of these craft books, unless it's really by like one person, usually it'll be a whole bunch of different authors in the genre giving their writing advice. And I don't know what I really expected. This is not a bad craft book. It's okay. If you are brand new to writing, you probably get a lot out of this. If you're in the mid phase or you've been writing for like decades now, this is a whole bunch of like just basic writing stuff, except it's written like it's being given to you by horror writers, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's mostly just basic horror stuff. What I was looking for was more like the ethos of horror. Like, I wanted a philosophy of horror, like examining what about this makes this scary and how do I somehow inject that into writing. There were a few in here that kind of went that way or gave like really good techniques, but for the most part, really all you can do, which is what a bunch of these stories did, was sort of talk about writing in general and then use examples either from your own horror writing work or from the classics. So for me, this was kind of a rehash, but I wouldn't say don't get it, because it did serve its purpose. It motivated me, and I don't think there's anything wrong with going over the basics again. What I wasn't expecting was that my other, the second nonfiction book, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, actually did for me what I wanted this book to do. If you don't know, Thomas Ligotti is a very, very famous horror writer. And The Conspiracy Against the Human Race is nonfiction. It's more of a philosophy about how human consciousness is actually like aberrant. Like, it never should have happened. It makes us monstrous. And like a lot of what he talks about is how life, or our version of it, is malignantly useless, and that we essentially should not be. And I thought that was going to be extremely interesting, but to be honest with you, I did not care. I didn't care. If I was in my teens or very early 20s, like, been rocking it, but for me at this point, while I respect the opinion, the worldview, and the philosophy, this is not how I view the world. For me, it's hard to look at that as a perspective that isn't wounded. The middle part of this book, I was just sort of like, oh, okay, I mean, yeah, I see your point, but it's not for me. However, he talks about the philosophy of horror. Also, he talks about, which was very, very important, the way you have to think to write an effective horror story. It requires a certain way of looking at the world. And if you can't look at the world that way, if you can't look at the world from that space of horror, from that space of weirdness and uncanniness, you might write an effective story depending, but it's not going to be something especially like earth-shattering. It's not going to be maybe something that really sticks with somebody for a really long time. I would suggest... Thank you, I appreciate, well, we have a Tubbs now. But I would suggest reading this if you're a horror writer and you haven't read it already. So I recommend this. I recommend this if you're going to be reading craft books and you're a horror writer. Please do read this. This last one, this is the last nonfiction book I haven't read. The Eighth Tower by John Keel. This is the guy, if you don't know, he wrote the Mothman prophecies, and he investigates high strangeness. All things that we just like throw under the term paranormal, people like this investigate and they come up with theories for why that is. It's working off of the premise that these phenomena do exist, and but they're not necessarily what we think they are. The little tagline on the back of the book is there a single intelligent force behind all religious, occult, and UFO phenomena? But anyway, I'm super interested in high strangeness. It's a big part of my life. Okay, we're gonna go into the fiction now. I played myself. If you don't know who Terry Miles is, but he does like the Black Tapes, he does Tanis, he does Rabbits, the podcast, and I think he has another one called Fairy, which I was like, ooh, Fairy, like, let me check it. No, I will not. I get into this weird loop with his content where it's, I'm just like, oh no, I remember like really liking that, and I stopped listening. And then I go back and re-listen, and I always stop at the same point, and I'm just like, stop getting involved with this. I just got brainwashed. Oh, I've got this new book, Rabbits. I've got this new book, Rabbits. And like, you don't have to follow the podcast to know. And it's a contained story and blah, 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 blah. So I was like, you know what? Why not? Almost immediately, I knew I had made a mistake. A lot of this book is taken up by like references to like classic video games. The book is about a game, so it makes sense that the characters are gamers, but it was just like, I don't know that we needed as much. It was just like super like, I know about a thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like when books do that, it's like, I know about art, okay? Like, I know about games, okay? Obviously. If you were doing that to describe a certain type of character, like if you were differentiating your characters by the types of games they played, that would be really cool. But this didn't really do that. And it's the same problem that I have with most of Terry Miles's content, is that really the characters are kind of all interchangeable. Like it's the same characters or character types every single time. Besides the gaming references, there's a lot of paying attention to like a specific shirt that a character is wearing, making a specific reference, or like when he goes into a room, it's like, let me tell you all of the like obscure brand, like let me tell you about all this furniture, but yet my characters are extremely shallow. Even though there's a lot going on with this main character, it's still like all of his like internal stuff. For me, a lot of it is very surface level, and it's way more about the concept of the book, like the slick way like things are designed in the book, and like the banter. And if you've listened to any of these podcasts, you know exactly what banter that I'm talking about, because it's the exact same format of banter for like across the board. Like literally, like two different characters use the words "it's complicated" several times, and I was just like, oh, I hate that I did this. I hate that I did this. Yeah, for me, this is a no. But I would say, if you are a big fan of those podcasts, You will love this book. And if you're looking for something like super trendy that's a little bit weird and spooky, but not really like scary, and it's in general like a quick read, and it does wrap up within the one book, it's a standalone, then I would say, yeah, go ahead and pick this up, especially if you're into things like ARGs or like internet urban legends or things like that. I don't think you will hate this. So, like, that's over. It's done. It's canceled. We are never getting back together, like, ever. So my next fiction book, I got an Arthur Machen horror collection. I had already heard the Weird Studies version of The White People. If you want to try out Machen's work before purchasing anything more, just go on the Weird Studies podcast, and they have a nice little recording. Like, it's the full story of The White People. Like, everybody, when you hear about Machen, it's always the Great God Pan, the Great God Pan. Like, that's the story, the Great God Pan. I'm gonna say it's The White People. The White People is the best one. I have only hated one story out of this. It's a novella. It's called The Hill of Dreams. Oh my God, did I hate that? Wow. What was amusing about it is, like, he spends a lot of time complaining about the publishing industry. Facts. It hasn't changed. If you go back and read his character, like, whining about the publishing industry and then get on Twitter, it's the same thing. It's been a century and we're talking about the same thing. That was amusing to me, but not amusing enough to make me not hate the story, because I super hated it. Lovecraft took a lot of inspiration from Machen, and I can see how he improved on certain things. A lot of the structure of these stories is sort of like events are happening, and sort of like the POV characters are sort of getting that information secondhand. Like, another character is coming up and like, excuse me, sir, I would like to tell you my life story. Oh yes, madam, let me hear it. And then they'll like start telling you about this weird thing that happened, but they're not actually experiencing it firsthand. Lovecraft, despite his aggressive flaws, something that he did, I think, better than Machen is taking that like antiquarian researcher character and like letting them just experience everything for the most part. The Shadow over Innsmouth and The Color Out of Space and the music of Eric Zahn and all that stuff is like, you're directly in it. So if you like that aspect of H.P. Lovecraft and you don't want to deal with really any racist, Arthur Machen, at least from what I can tell about his stories, like, isn't the god-awful racist, misogynist, just kind of nasty person that Lovecraft was. I liked that about this. Like, these stories definitely have a lighter tone, but they're not less interesting. But I will say, after reading The Great God Pan, let down. That's another thing I notice about a lot of maybe sort of Victorian-ish or like adjacent literature. There's a lot of like, this woman has been tainted with evil and like, we need to get away. That shows up a lot. Like, let's analyze, let's unpack that. If you're looking for something that is not Lovecraft, but is similar to a Lovecraft story, but is more, I don't know that lighthearted is the right word for this, but it is. It's just lighter, it's sunnier, but it's also weird and spooky. But it's not something that's gonna ruin your day. This isn't gonna do that. You can read this and get a little spine tingly like before you go to bed. You're not gonna have problems going to sleep. The last two pieces of fiction I have not read yet. I've got A God in the Shed by J.F. Dubois. I've been hearing a lot about this. People are comparing it to like True Detective and Twin Peaks and stuff like that, and I like the concept of, it's not a spoiler, there's a god in a shed. I like that. There's a god in a shed. Creepy shit. I'm here for it. People who don't like ambiguous stuff and just weird things happening with like they want to have like somebody, I saw somebody be like, can we talk about the magic system in this book? And I was just like, that clued me in big time to the type of person who won't like reading something like this, because that's completely valid. Some people really want like cohesive rules for stuff that is going on. But for me, once you start explaining everything, it gets a lot less scary. Like when weird things are just happening, I'm just like, okay, I'm here for it. I don't understand what's going on, but this is scary as shit. Like, let's go. I don't know what that is. I don't know what's going on, but it's scary and I'm upset about it. So I'm interested in this because like I love True Detective. I love Twin Peaks. I can handle ambiguous weirdness. So this is the last one, and this seems like it's kind of a mashup of like thriller and horror, a touch of Jen. And I really liked the book Social Creature, and this seems to have like maybe a little bit of some of that in this. So this is about like two coworkers who are obsessed with another coworker, and the coworker that they're obsessed with, like she doesn't work with them anymore. She's like this big time influencer now, and they're super obsessed with her, and they like, you know, it's all they do is they online stalk her essentially. And then one day the influencer that they're obsessed with invites them to a big influencer party that's out on this island somewhere. And apparently on this island, shit goes down and it turns into some kind of like acid trip horror. But it's got a lot of elements that I really like. The internet, for one, what the internet does to people, both like making content on it and like viewing that content and participating in that content in really weird ways. Obsession, and just how that works within an online space. I'm excited to read this. I think after I finish this Machen book, I'm gonna do John Keel first. Actually, it's gonna be the order. It's gonna be John Keel first with that 8th tower with the ultra terrestrials, then A God in a Shed, and then we're gonna wrap it up with A Touch of Jen. And then I will need to buy some new books. So that's it. Those are my thoughts. That's what I'm gonna be reading throughout October. And maybe I'll do Touch of Jen as like a read with me for like for a bigger book. Yeah. Touch of Jen will do a read with me when I get there, and I hope y'all have a great day.